What we have when you land on Pure1 is this aggregate page. This gives you an overview of all of your arrays. So this is an actual live environment. We run our own arrays as our dog food. So this is an actual development environment. And you see we run our arrays fairly full on a number of these. And you can see alerts and information about the arrays. You could see some of the new features that we launched in the banner. And that gives you a quick way to get access to more information or the release notes for the feature itself. The topics that I'm going to talk about are our assessment, so safe mode assessment. We're going to go into the virtual machine information and how that's going to impact our customers as we migrate over to the container analytics portion of it. We're going to go into the planning side and how we're using Meta to make the customers' lives easier. And then we're going to go into some of the final marketplace portions of it that allow customers to go into more of an operational side of things. So first, I'm going to go into the dashboard here. So the dashboard gives an aggregated overview of your fleet. So the card view is an individual overview. The dashboard gives you an aggregated view. So here's kind of the status of what's going on across all of my arrays. The main reason that I wanted to talk about this is the first place that you'll see the safe mode over here. So safe mode is a feature on the FlashArray and FlashBlade that help protect against ransomware attacks by ultimately focusing on helping you adhere to best practices. The best way to prevent issues stemming from something like ransomware is obviously good hygiene, making use of best practices and proper protection policies. And so safe mode helps enable that in an automated way. And what Pure1 does here is it gives you an overview of where the feature is enabled, whether or not it's got a upgrade requirement. So some of the arrays, some of the older arrays that are running Purity versions that are older than when we release the feature, obviously won't have that. So we'll let you know where the upgrade is required. And the assessment page here gives you a lot more information on that. So you can see here that this array is disabled and it requires an upgrade in order to be able to protect on the object store side of things. And so I'm in a read-only view, but as a customer, you'll be able to actually click this button and you'll go in and it'll open a scheduling tool where you can go and choose a time and date for this upgrade. I can show you how that looks. If I just jump over to the cases, you can see request service here and upgrade Purity software.
Hey, Stan, the safe mode, besides upgrading to the latest level of code, does it provide for snapshot protection of the data? Does it provide for air gaps, immutability, those sorts of things? Or what all is involved in safe mode? I guess the question.
Yeah, so I'm not going to go into too much detail on the safe mode side of things. To be honest, it's mostly because I'm not an expert on that. It's a FlashArray and FlashBlade feature, but yes, it largely revolves around making sure that you have snapshots enabled on the volumes in the protection groups. We want to make sure that any eradication timers are extended and are not accessible to users. So users are not able to go in and eradicate the snapshots. If you're not familiar with FlashArray or FlashBlade, there's always a two-step deletion process. First, you delete a volume or snapshot, but that gets put into an eradication bucket. So it's still on the array, kind of like the recycle bin on your desktop. And then in order to actually delete this in the snapshots of the volume, you need to eradicate it. So we prevent that as a user action. So there are definitely steps there that help prevent any issues coming out of a ransomware attack as best we can.
And Stan, this is Charles. Just to add to that, for the air gapping, we do allow multiple targets for the backup copies, including if you want to take it off the tape for storage offsite. So that's also allowed.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Charles. And as you are going into the scheduler here, what you will have the ability to do, you're going to see a similar UI on the safe mode scheduling side. You'll be able to go in, choose an array. It'll populate the versions that are available to upgrade on this array. And so I can go ahead and choose the latest version in this code base. And then once you go over to the schedule side, you'll be able to see the calendar of support availability. So if I want to do the upgrade on the 13th, that's the earliest date available. I can choose a time slot, and that will be scheduled. It'll go on the support calendar. Support will reach out and make sure that the array is ready to go for the upgrade, and gives you the ability to have a bit of a smoother upgrade process. So beyond that, in the assess mode,
So Stan, why would it be the 13th and not the 6th or 7th or 8th? You know, why would it be sometime in a week or so rather than immediately to update? What would what would be making the schedule busy? I guess the question.
Mm-hmm. We do a pretty large amount of upgrades as a company. So within the scheduling tool, we want to make sure that the time slot is available. And not only that, we do want to leave a little bit of a gap for support to be able to handle any kind of upgrades that need to happen immediately. So that's part of the reason. And the other reason is we want to make sure that the support org has the right amount of time to go in, evaluate the array, make sure that the array is healthy and ready for an upgrade, making sure that the hosts are connected to both controllers, because as I'm sure you all know, you're all technologists, upgrades are probably one of the most dangerous times. Anytime you're moving parts, you've got moving parts, anytime you're changing code, that does become slightly more dangerous. So we want to make sure that the support organization, whoever's assigned to upgrading the array, has the right amount of time to monitor the array for at least a couple days, make sure that the team has the ability to look at all the parameters around in order to have the upgrade go as smooth as possible. And it obviously works because as far as I'm aware, we have a fantastic track record on upgrades. They are non-disruptive, and like I said earlier, we do have customers running upgrades on arrays that are in the middle of running their primary workload in the middle of the day. So on that, the safe mode assessment, as you can see here, is simply just a table today. This is going to grow significantly. We have fantastic plans in order to make sure that this tool, the first thing that we're going to do is change the user interface a little bit in order to make it more accessible and more understandable at a glance. As I mentioned earlier, the number one thing that you could do is follow best practices, and the easier it is to follow best practices, the better the world is going to be. And so we're going to be changing the UI for this feature in order to make it more accessible. We have some more visual elements to the tool that we're going to provide, give it a red, yellow, green color scheme in order to make it more easy to see whether or not these arrays have safe mode enabled or if there are any issues with the arrays. And then ultimately what we're going to do is we're going to grow that capability. And as we make this more mature, what we want to do is add alerting into this concept. So as we see how customers are using this, we'll build out the models on the back end in order to make sure that we're alerting the proper information, we're alerting relevant information, and the customers are happy and not getting noisy alerts. And then finally, this is where meta comes into play. What our data science team is doing today is they're looking at arrays that may exhibit certain workload patterns that might be indicative of any kind of anomalous behavior. So in general, anomaly detection is a fantastic feature, but when applied directly to any sort of change in workload that might look like a drop in data reduction or any kind of increase in throughput rate, that might be a fantastic early warning system. in order to determine whether or not there might be an attack happening or something that the storage admin needs to look into. And in any case, if there's a significant change in workload, like I said, whether or not it's an attack or what it's something else, the DBA decided to change the workload and it's hammering the array, we want to give the storage admins access to this information as soon as possible. So that's a feature that the team is working on right now. We're going to be looking to release that fairly soon, I think, as we round out the research and as we look into what we can and can't release in terms of the quality of the anomalies that we detect. Because, like I said, if you have a lot of noise, then it's not a useful feature. So the next thing I want to talk about is the planning page. So I'm going to go ahead and clear these guys. And we've got a number of arrays here. So what you're seeing, I've applied a filter here. This is the department finance filter. And so I've got a couple of arrays that are available. In this table, you've got your projected load and your projected used capacity. Now, load is essentially the same as capacity on the performance side of things. It's a 0 to 100% rating of how utilized the array is from a performance perspective. And on the capacity side, it's the same for capacity. So as we look at the forecast for the array, you can do a number of things. So the first thing you can do is you can simulate hardware. You can simulate workload and changing the workloads as well. Right now, the array looks like it's in a pretty healthy state in the next month. So let's add a workload to the array in order to make it look like that the array is in trouble. So you can create a new workload. So there are two ways to do this. First, you can create a workload that doesn't exist on the array at all. So this is also based on meta. We do an analysis on the workloads running on our arrays. They're generally fairly well labeled. So we can identify the workloads that are running on them based on volume naming or workload patterns. Obviously, we don't have access to the actual workload information. So it's based on machine learning and AI. But these are some of the workloads that are typically common running on our arrays. So you can go in and, for example, size an SAP workload. And what you'll get is a preview. You have a typical workload size that is populated. If you think that the workload that you're going to add is a little bit on the smaller side or a little bit on the larger side, you can customize it a little bit to have some guidelines of what we see on our arrays. And you also have the ability to create a custom workload. So the custom workload, you could customize it any way you want. These bars give a range of generally what we see. So typically for SAP, read IO size 115 is generally the largest that we see. But if you think you just have a very specific workload and you're running at 256, you can also do that, and you can customize the workload, and you can see it kind of goes off the charts, but it is available to you. And you could do the same thing for the write. And so let's make this look a little bit bigger, and let's say that it's 50,000 write IOPS, and we got really big reads. And so I can go ahead and save this workload, and I can select a target array. So what you see here is one of the newest features that we launched is the ability to provide recommendations. Now I have a filter applied here, and so it will give me recommendations across these 5 arrays. And so the filter is a great way. So for example, if you have a lab array in your environment, you obviously don't want a recommendation to place a production workload on a lab array. So you would apply the filter and would only recommend across the arrays that are contained in the filter. And so as the recommendation engine is kind of going on the back end, it's crunching away, it's taking into account a number of different parameters for these workloads. It's going to go in and it's going to give us a result, whether the array is recommended, not recommended, or we have a problem. So in this case, none of the arrays can handle the performance of this workload, but that's okay. I'm just going to go in. I'm going to choose Chew Toy anyway. It's at 98% full from a performance perspective and 89 from a capacity perspective. Oh, actually, I probably want to use the first one here. So we're going to go there next, and we can place the workload. And so now you can see that the workload here, we're looking at this array, it's an X50. I can go in and I can simulate hardware on the array. So what we're going to see is that we're at well over 100% full with this workload. The capacity is not in a great place. So this allows you to ask the what if question. So what if I upgraded the array to an X90R3? Is that going to be able to handle the workload? And in this case, it pretty much will be able to handle the workload. We're at 86%, gives you a little bit of headroom in order to be able to handle any kind of burstiness in the workload. And on the capacity side, you can go in and you can add a shelf. And now that I'm at an X90R3, it drops the capacity down to about 37%, which is a perfectly fine amount here. I'm not sure if you noticed, but one of the things that happened is the X50R3 actually got grayed out. And so this is fully integrated in with our limits. And so if the array is not capable of adding any more capacity, so if I'm over the limit on the array, I can get into here. And now these data packs are grayed out. So we prevent the customer from getting into any kind of problems where they won't be able to the array won't be able to handle the configuration that they're looking at.
Stan, quick question here. Can you also replicate an existing workload, maybe multiplying an existing workload for 2 or 3? Maybe
yes.
I have a specific VM or, I don't know, a group of VMs that I want to replicate.
Absolutely. Well, not at the VM side. If you're using vvols, that would be the best way to do it. But if you go into, and I apologize, I went through that a little quick. If you go into the top here, first I went into simulate new workload. You also have the ability to simulate an existing workload. And so here, what you're doing is you're going in and these existing workloads, engineer VMs 1, 2, and 3, you can go in and you have a couple operations that you could do. You could scale the workloads. And so, for example, if I think that these VMs are going to increase, let's say we acquired a company like Portworx, and it's going to increase about 1.5x in terms of the engineering VMs. You can go ahead and apply that, and then it'll give you the simulation summary and tell you what's going to happen. In this case, the array was pretty loaded to begin with, and so it won't work very well. So now what do we do? One of the options that you can do on this is migrate the workloads as well. So you're saying I added a new workload to this array. It's going to give the array a hard time with the existing workloads. What happens if I migrate the workloads off the array? And so you have the recommendation option here again. In this case, now we only have 4 arrays because we're migrating the workload off of the array. And I can go ahead and give a recommendation. And in this case, I would expect that there should be at least one array to be able to handle the workload. But as it's loading, it'll give you the option to do that. The other thing you can do is you have the Add New Array button. So this is a very flexible tool that gives you the ability to go in and either add the array or add the workload to an existing array, or if there are no workloads that fit on the existing arrays that you have, you can simulate adding a new array. So in this case, dog food elk is the recommended array in terms of optimal placement. And as you look down, the rest of the arrays, they're pretty fine, but they're not optimal. So in this case, it's non-optimal placement, but it'll work. As you saw earlier, if we don't believe the workload will fit on the array, we will specifically call out that it will not fit on the array.
As a quick question.
Quick question there.
Okay, go ahead, Christian.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Is there an API for this as well?
Not today. It is something that we're going to be working on. One of the main features that we have, if I go into the, might as well select this array, go ahead on the next. On the graphs, we have a training window. And what the training window does is it allows you to come in and choose which parts of the workload you want to project against. So in this case, what we have is I can go in and I can exclude this portion in the gray from the workload. Now, what does this have to do with an API? A lot of the tool right now is visual. You have to go in and you want to make sure that you understand the workload and it makes sense. So with an API, you don't have that visual cue, and you might be projecting a workload that doesn't quite match what reality is based on this information. So we've shied away a little bit about doing an API, but now that the tool's been out for quite a while, I believe it's 3 or so years, we believe that we've gotten to the point where it's stable enough and we know enough about how people use the tool that we're going to be developing an API that work is starting this coming quarter, and hopefully that'll be available soon.
Just to follow up, the reason I asked for it is when you have a virtualized environment where you have automation software in it, you might have someone go in and order a bunch of VMs that you know the characteristics of. It would be really handy to actually ask the storage infrastructure, where can I fit this as a part of the automation process? Yeah. Instead of deploying it directly to some array somewhere, you could actually ask the Fabric or the Pure1, where is the best fit for these VMs, and get that back and have it put on that data store.
It's almost like you've seen our roadmap. Yeah, that's exactly the use case that we're looking to enable via API as well as in the GUI. We want to make it easier to get information out without interacting with the product. So as I'm sure you noticed, a lot of what I was doing was interacting with Pure1 and getting information out of it. The recommendation step was the first in the automated recommendations. And so that's the first time that we took the training window out and we applied logic, machine learning logic on the back end in order to better understand the actual workload that's happening, so that we're not giving bad recommendations. And so as we build out beyond that first step, that's exactly what we're looking to get into.
Hi, Stan. Jason, I have a question. So once I've got these recommendations, like you were saying, you could recommend, should I migrate this workload? Can I turn that into an action? Can I then take it and it can migrate that workload for me? Or you sized up a new controller. Can I just send that to you and you ship it to me? Yeah, can I do something with it next?
Not today. I do think that I can say it is in our vision. We do plan on that, and I think you'll notice that I didn't say on our roadmap. That's a little bit longer term, especially as we're looking into automating and actually taking action from Pure1 on the arrays. That's a bit of a bigger step into some other things, because Pure1 runs in the cloud. There's a lot of benefits to doing that. It's a lot more agile. We can release new features all the time. You don't need hardware to run it, but it does mean that there's a kind of a separation between the cloud and the arrays. But it is something that we're absolutely looking into once that's kind of tested and vetted, and make sure that everything is capable and able to happen safely and securely. That's definitely the direction that we're moving into. We want to make automation as simple as possible for our customers.
When you get a recommendation to take some workload of one array and put it on another array, how does that look like? Does it present you a list of volumes that you need to move, or how does that work? Yeah, so right now, the workflow that I just went through, so if I go back a couple steps, you can choose a set of volumes and you can ask us for a recommendation. So, hey, I'm looking at these specific volumes and I think I want to move them off to another array. Which array should I move them to? That's the recommendation process today. The next step of the recommendation process is to do that analysis on the back end and provide a recommendation to the customer without any input. Now, you might, the way I said that, you might have thought, hey, that sounds annoying, right? And that's why we're going with this step first. We want the customer input on how customers use recommendations, instead of going straight into, hey, we're just going to give you recommendations about your environment that we don't know your best practices. We don't know how you place your volumes. So we're using this as a learning tool in order to train the models on how customers are using the recommendation tools. And then once we have that,
we're going to start getting into more of the proactive recommendations. And the way we're thinking about it is we want to do the proactive recommendations in context of where you are. So we want them out of the way. We don't want them to be kind of glaring straight in your face. We don't want you to have to go somewhere and just only look at a list of recommendations. We want to give you the ability to see recommendations in context. So if you're looking at a protection page and there are recommendations for protection, you'll see them there for the array that you're looking at, for the volumes that you're looking at. But we also want to give you the ability to access the overall recommendations if you're taking a step back and just looking at your whole environment and being able to say, okay, what can I do to make this better, to make this safer, to make this a little bit more resilient? We'll also have that. And right now, the plan is to have more of a sidebar, kind of how we have, if I cancel out of this, we have your alerts up here. We also want to basically think of another icon there that's more recommendations, which will give you access to the list of recommendations.
Next question is, I'm not yet a Pure customer. Do you have any tools that let you read my current environment to feed into this workload analysis so that you can right size me the right kind of array, or I can play around with how far can I push this? What should I be getting myself into?
No, I love the questions. They're great, especially given the ad hoc nature of the presentation. It's helping me out for sure. As for tools, we don't have a tool in Pure1. We do partner with another company in order to do the analysis, because workloads are never just quite as cut and dry as, hey, here are the parameters. There's always a human element to it, understanding the growth, understanding what the plans are for this. A lot of times what that ends up being is an engagement with the SE. And so our SE team will go in, we'll work with the customer to do the assessment of the existing workloads to understand what's going to be working over, and then we'll be able to go in and input the workloads into the array. As we build out the API for this, that's definitely something that we're going to look into, is having a bit more of an automated workflow from the assessment into the tool, but we're not quite there yet.
Sounds good.
So for the workload planner, I think it's fairly easy to understand where we're going to be using things like anomaly detection. So we want to make sure that the workloads that we're planning against, we don't want to forecast based on anomalous behavior. So if there's a spike that happened on one Friday because something weird happened in the environment, we don't want to use that to predict the workload, because if it's a one-time thing, obviously that's going to result in a poor prediction because we're using that spike in the forecast. So anomaly detection will allow us to have better predictions. That being said, our predictions are actually being used by a large number of our enterprise customers to help in situations where they might be coming up into a change control window. So for example, a lot of our retail customers, obviously we have Black Friday, they'll go in and use the workload planner to understand where the arrays are trending, to be able to see whether or not they need to upgrade the arrays before this Black Friday blackout period, where they can't change their environment just for the sake of stability. And so being able to go in, use anomaly detection to make those recommendations even better, to make those environments even safer, that's going to be a huge portion of the strategy of Pure1 going forward. Great. So now another portion of Pure1, as I mentioned earlier, is the marketplace. So what we have here is the catalog, and we've got the orders, as you see on the left-hand side there. So between the catalog and the orders, what we're trying to give customers is the ability to go beyond monitoring your arrays, your software, Portworx, Cloud Block Store, that kind of stuff. We want to give customers the ability to monitor more of the operational side of, or aspect of the acquisition process. As we talk to customers, as easy as the acquisition process for Pure Storage is, there are always places where we can improve on the process. So we've got Pure as a service, we've got cloud native offerings such as Portworx, and we've got our professional services here in the catalog today, and we continue to grow the offerings that you can see. And so if you go into any one of these, it gives you an overview. It's a very clear, nice laid out page that tells you what you're actually getting with this order. Once you're in here, and let's say you decide that this is something that you want to use, you can go in, you can request a quote. You can, since this is pure as a service, right? This is a kind of pay-as-you-go type thing. You can choose your reserve capacity, and you can customize it. So you could choose the term. And one of the most important things is you can see the estimated price here. Right, so this is available upfront. Obviously, this is MSRP, so you're probably going to be paying a little bit less than that, but at least it gives you an idea of what you're doing.
So Stan, because Pure1 is really only part of a service contract, so customers that currently don't own Pure couldn't take advantage of this service, right?
That's correct. That being said, it's not particularly difficult to get a customer set up to Pure1. So as long as as long as they're engaged with Pure Storage, right? As long as they're talking to a sales team, they're most likely going to be in our systems. And then the salesperson can just create a Pure1 account. It's very straightforward. It's very simple for that to happen. And it won't be the greatest experience because, again, it's mostly focused on monitoring arrays. And if you don't have any arrays, then you only have a small percentage of the tool that you could use. But you will absolutely have access to this tool. You'll have access to being able to do this. And one of the interesting things, I haven't talked too much about VM Analytics since it's a bit of an older product, but it is, you can actually set up VM Analytics and you could see your environment as a whole there.
So Pure as a service and the cloud native products are all available in various marketplaces as well. So if a customer really wanted to just purchase those, they can go directly to that rather than using Pure1.
Yeah, and we're continuing to add new marketplaces to our repertoire, where we're constantly working with a number of other vendors and partners in order to have our products available within their tools, within their marketplaces, because ultimately, while we do want customers to use Pure1, and that's why we have this tool built in to Pure1, if that's what they want to use. But if the customers are comfortable using their existing partners, their existing capabilities, then yeah, absolutely, go ahead and use that if that's what's easier for you.
All right, thanks.
Ray, I could add some additional color on that too. So like you said, that is correct. You can go to the respective marketplaces on AWS or Azure to access those services, the cloud services. We only offer Performance Block as a cloud service. So you can actually click in the service catalog on Performance Block and you'll be given the option to go to, it'll sort of redirect you to AWS or Azure if you do that. So you can actually do that through here, or you can do it directly in those respected marketplaces.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, so once you potentially place a request for a quote here, and you're going through, you can request a trial or request a quote. It'll end up on the orders page. And so as we're looking here, what you have is a number of information about the order that you've placed. And so you could see that there was a trial requested in this case. The request is in progress. So this goes out to our backend. It goes out to the sales team. They will review the request. They'll reach out and they'll move it along into the approval stage. And once the trial is ready, the customer can then go in and actually access this information. As if you're going in, and I'm just going to go ahead and clear that, and getting a new subscription, you also have that same workflow for a quote. And so today, what you have is a fairly separated experience where you can go in and you can request a quote, and then it goes to a person, and then that engagement happens. Ultimately, what we're moving into as we expand the recommendation engine, as we expand a lot of the products that we offer, as we bring in Portworx, as we bring in the other new placements, for example, for CBS, we want to allow customers to actually manage this end to end on their own. And so one of the biggest things is that they're going to be able to go in and request a quote and ultimately go through there. Now, one of the most important pieces of or aspects of Pure Storage is that we are a 100% partner company. And this in no way changes that. We will absolutely include the partner. The partner is included in every step of the process. The partner will be on file and will be engaged through the back end. And so it gives us a holistic experience where the customer gets the same partner experience that they're used to with Pure Storage. It's just a little bit more streamlined. They get access to the information they need. You get shipment information and more information about that as well. Ralph, is there anything else that you wanted to mention on this?
Yeah, so there's I think you did kind of briefly mention it, but if a customer is going in evaluating services from the service catalog and they go and order something, before it's actually approved by the AESE and partner, they can actually manage that subscription and manipulate it. So before they actually have a conversation with the account team, they can go in and edit the subscription. So for some reason they got something wrong or they felt that they needed more capacity, they can go do that. They can also, after a subscription is active and the product shipped and on premises, they can actually go back in and add more. So they can manage that subscription. That's something we didn't have before. Before it was Pure as a service for the first order, and then you couldn't go back to Pure 1. So it was a little confusing for customers. So we just recently added a new feature where they can go in and even after they've started the subscription, they can add additional services to the existing subscription without having to, break out of Pure 1, because we want Pure 1 again to be that sort of one-stop shop for everything that they do as it pertains to Pure Storage infrastructure.
So maybe Ralph or Stan, you can talk about the further Portworx integration in here. I mean, you mentioned that you can order Portworx as a service kind of thing, cloud native container stuff, but where do you see Portworx playing a role in the workload planning and upgrade process, or even the safe mode assessment?
Yeah, so I'm laughing because it's like you teed me up to a T. The reason I pulled Ralph in is I needed a second to pull up this screen, which is our Portworx representation. So since Portworx is a fairly new acquisition, it's a new product. This feature is actually going to be launching fairly soon. So this is a mock-up of what it's going to look like. So initially, what we want to do is we want to add information about just the cluster information, typical monitoring tools. And so we have what we have here is information about the cluster. You can go in and you can see whether there are offline nodes, and nodes with warning, volumes with warning or nodes with warning. And this feature is going to be launching within a week. And so we're hot on the tail of getting the Portworx integration kicked off. As we evolve into the future, what we want Portworx to come into is more of a visual platform similar to the VM analytics tool. And so you'll be able to have an overview of the end-to-end environment, from the nodes to the volumes to the hosts to the clusters, and that gives you the ability to pull up the topology and understand where things are connected, how things are connected. It's one of the most favorited features by our customers, just being able to go in and view their VMware topology. And ultimately, that's what Portworx is going to grow into. Now, on the subscriptions and management side, Portworx is software only. And so this is the best place where we can go in and build that automation with the end-to-end infrastructure, where you can go and get access to a lot of the information. And so you could see you have the ability to potentially upgrade your license. You can, if this is a trial where you can go ahead and actually buy that in there, and it ties into the same kind of workflow where right now it will go to a person. It won't just automatically charge a credit card the second you click that button. But ultimately, what we want to do is make the process as streamlined as possible. It's software, so we want to make it easy to be able to get what you need when you need it. And I can click through here onto some of the volumes. And so you'll be able to see any kind of information about the volumes here or the nodes as well, where you have visibility into some of the node information, what's happening, why it's offline, and some information about the memory, the CPU utilization. So this gives you
So in this case, where nodes are discussed, we're talking about Kubernetes worker nodes, or we're talking about Portworx storage nodes, or what is a node in this context?
For that, I believe it would be a Portworx node.
All right.
Portworx storage node, yeah. Ralph, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
I think that's correct.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so as we build out the Portworx integration, we have, what is this, 6 years now of Pure1 developing against FlashArray, and a little bit less of Pure1 developing against FlashBlade. As we build out more and more features on Portworx, we'll be able to see how customers are using this. We'll be able to see how customers are engaging with this and prioritize the features that kind of make life easier. One of the core ideas of Pure1 that I try to instill in any of the features that we work on is what we want to do is we want to give customers the information that they need when they need it. And as we build into more anomaly detection use cases, that gives us a much better opportunity to get this information over to customers, get this information to whoever needs it, whether it's the storage admin. And like I said, we're growing into potentially procurement and other roles at the company, where Pure1 is going to become much more of an all-encompassing tool that anybody can use in order to get the information they need.
So Stan, this is going off sort of back to something you were talking about a little bit earlier. So I'm reluctant to break your stride. Is it okay if I break in and I want to talk about the anomaly detection and recommendations for when there's problems?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Yeah, so you were highlighting some of the things, like looking for things that are going a bit weird in a customer's environment. But you were talking in the context of the protection of safe mode.
That's right.
For the fleet more generally, do you monitor for configuration drift away from known good configurations to look for things that, hang on, this configuration is a bit strange, that's going to cause you problems based on what we know about how customers generally operate Pure Storage stuff? Is that sort of information available in Pure1?
As we expand more of the safe mode use cases, that's going to be our first foray into something like that. Pure Storage is built on simplicity, and so ultimately, what that amounts to is there aren't a whole lot of configuration. There isn't a whole lot of configuration that you can actually do on the arrays, right? In order to create a volume, you give it a name and you give it a size, and then you connect it up to hosts. And so we do give some host information on the array because, if anything, you're going to be looking at on the array. And with the safe mode assessment, this is where we're starting to get into being able to see that information in Pure1. And so for the most part, we've strived to tackle some more pressing features first, because the probability or the ability to misconfigure a Pure Storage array is kind of minimized just through how the products have been developed. And so that's basically how we've looked at it to date. And so now that things are getting a little bit more uncertain in kind of the world around us, we're starting to add more and more of that capabilities in order to reduce that small risk of misconfiguration, whether it's on accident or on purpose through a malicious actor. We want to minimize that as much as possible. So right now the answer is we don't have that in too many places, but that's the direction that we're going in.
Okay, because I was also thinking about things like volume layouts for, like, say, okay, here's what MongoDB typically looks like, and I, as a customer, have come up with some Byzantine weird kind of layout, and just flags them. That's going, most people don't run Mongo like that, or Postgres, or whatever it might be. Like, are you sure you want to configure it like that?
Yeah, we've looked at a little bit of that in the past. What ended up happening was we heard from not a lot, but a decent number of customers that well, no, that's just how we run it. That's our best practices, and that's how we want to configure it. And so we've taken a little bit of a step back in order to be able to do a little bit more research and understand where we can identify specific issues with the configuration versus just simply, hey, this doesn't look the same as somebody else's. And so that gets a whole lot more nuanced. And so we're still researching that. But basically what I can say is, as we're doing the anomaly detection for a lot of the safe mode assessment use cases, that's going to build the foundation to be able to get into more of that kind of cross customer understanding of, hey, this is how the majority of people do it. You're doing it differently. Now, is that bad or is that just different? And so that's kind of that's the stage we're at today.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
I would love to add to that to say, as this matures, please do investigate the potential for bottleneck detection or misconfigurations above the array. I spend a lot of time consulting on, quote, it's slow, specifically around large database systems. And what I find is that, if they're on Pure, it's fine. But when you start looking at the layers above it, there are some very easy things to check for in VMware, Hyper-V, things like that essentially it's like connecting your Pure array, which is a fire hose, to a straw. These misconfigurations above it. I'd love to have information in there to say, you need to fix this. Click here to go do it.
So I'll add a little bit to that. Justin, you that question was great, and David also. I think that's great what you guys are saying there. It's interesting because there are things that we actually do that are not in Pure 1 today, which could be potentials for some of the things you're saying right now. So, for instance, there are customers that could potentially have misconfiguration issues, whether it be like high availability. So the support center does actually use algorithms and fingerprinting to detect those kinds of things. So let's say that a customer is not in a highly available configuration. Believe it or not, that gets flagged via a fingerprint, and a case gets opened, and then the customer is alerted that there's actually a connectivity issue. So we do that kind of thing, but we don't bubble that stuff up into Pure 1 currently. So that is something where that's a great recommendation to maybe start bubbling that up and then take it maybe a step further to what you're saying, David, is move it up stack a little bit. So just, we do a little bit of that today, but it's more geared toward the support center, basic configuration stuff, not so much lower level or like application type of misconfigurations.
Yeah, I'd love to have a little bit higher in the stack. For example, let's say Cisco UCS FNIC queue depth is defaulted to 20. Your array can detect that's a bottleneck up above it, and to have a simple thing for either support or something here to say, look, you've connected a fire hose to a straw one layer above this array. Please fix this. Get the most out of your investment.
No, that's good feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm coming at it from is there's a lot of stuff in here. Like one of the benefits of Pure is that it is fairly simple and easy to use, so I can trust it. A lot of this stuff is very good, and Pure is already handling much of that. I do like that you send this sort of information into support and looking to minimize false positives and so on, because that's building trust with customers that when you put it into the product, it's not just pushing the support workload off to customers. Like self-service often means you broke it, you fix it. This is more about keeping me informed about what's going on, but I can trust that Pure will look after me. So I don't have to do anything about it, but I can see things, trust but verify. Right. So you're letting me know about stuff that goes on. And I mean, that if it goes into a support case and you ring me, that's kind of the same thing. But having it appear in multiple places, and like I'm just thinking of things like surfacing it in an API that means I can then plug that into my ServiceNow setup and coordinate with other parts of my organization that you can't necessarily see. There's a lot of companies are starting to do a lot more of that automation of how they talk to each other internally, and this would plug right into that.
So it's interesting because some of the things that I noticed when I joined Pure, I've been here for about 6 years, is that The idea that we don't ask the customer to change something about how they, maybe how they use an application to sort of use Pure Storage did mitigate a lot of the calls that I used to get at maybe other organizations I worked at, where we're asking the customer to fine tune the application for us. Because of the way we do things, that we're never asking them to really change anything about their application. So I'm not saying that those issues don't exist, but they're a lot less than I would have expected from like my prior history working with other storage products. But anyways, I do appreciate that, and we're definitely going to take note of that. There's some things I think some opportunities for adding some things to Pure 1 that might be valuable. So appreciate the comments.
A bit of a different question. A little bit maybe off topic, but you've built something really nice here, and I assume it's collecting a huge amount of data, probably billions of metrics in a week or something. Kind of just curious what you built it on. Like, is there a massive data lake beneath there? And like, how did you? This is no small undertaking. How did you come to build something like this?
Very slowly over time, I think is the answer. We have a number of engineering teams that are focused on simply the back end, as kind of we talked about here, right? If we're looking at our fleet, like I said, this is where our environment runs. This is where our test dev infrastructure exists. A lot of the Pure 1 data actually exists on FlashBlade. So one of the most interesting use cases that we have of eating our own dog food is all our logs land on FlashBlade. And we keep about 9 months worth of logs on FlashBlade, and then it's tiered off into the cloud where Pure 1 has access to it. And the use case for that was specifically for support. And we were able to reduce the amount of time it took support to get information about any problems that are happening on arrays significantly by just giving them better access to data. And so as we build, as we grow, as we try to place our own products within our use cases, we definitely have built up a pretty large data lake, and we have a number of teams managing that. I'm not quite sure how much I can talk about exactly what we're using, but we are in the process of kind of taking the existing backend and moving it over to a new software in order to not software, a new database in order to be able to scale better, because we're at the point where we have so much data that's that we're storing, that we're analyzing, that we're providing to customers that Pure 1 was starting to get to the point where we needed to slow roll some features in order to make sure that we have the performance capabilities. And we're just finishing up the migration now. And as soon as we cut over, we're going to be able to do a lot of really interesting things. It enables those anomaly detection use cases because our services just have better, faster access to data. So I think back to how I started it was just a little bit over time. And as we identified the specific use cases, as we identified some of the features that we wanted to tackle and accomplish, we give our engineering teams the freedom to kind of look out there and see what's available and pick and choose the right tool for the product.
Can you show the VM visualization tool? You mentioned that it was one of the more popular aspects of Pure 1.
So this is actually a video I created that's part of a series of videos we have that deeper dive all of the pieces of Pure 1. So it's the Digital Bytes series on the YouTube channel. So definitely check that out. This walks through the complete experience of the VMware Analytics tool. So basically, it's going to take us to, let's see, we'll go through. It's going to first, you click on the fleet and you click on virtual machines, and you'll see once you're in here, the little gear will spin, it will load. Now, if nothing loads and you can't see your environment, it's because the collector hasn't been deployed yet. So at that point, you just need to collect. These are the things you need to do prior to using it. So you just click on the.
And the collector runs in the Pure Storage systems, or is it running on the VMware vSphere, or what?
It's an OVA. So if you want to go back in time, history, we did have an on array collector, but it just became really cumbersome to manage for us, and it was just sort of an awkward situation. So it was a lot easier for us to just make an easy to deploy OVA. So basically, that's what they would do here. If there is no OVA collector, they can download the OVA. You can see that right there on the left. And then they go in from there and click on Create Collector. And then there's actually a help file if for some reason it's pretty self-explanatory. But once they go in, the collector will be configured. It takes about, I'd say on average, it's maybe 20 or 30 minutes, and then that data should start to bubble up, and you'll see exactly the views you see here. And this is the help file I was talking about. When you click on that, it tells you exactly what you need to do. It's a pretty simple process. We have several videos on it as well, but this kind of goes into it as at a high level, just so that a customer could feel comfortable with the process. But once that's there, it'll start collecting data, and you'll see a visualization from your host. So your ESX host, your data store on your array, your volume on your array, all the way back to your array, as well as the virtual machine and the virtual disk. So it literally will show you the whole entire stack. And because this can get really complicated, you can click on any one element of it, and I'll click through there, and it will build the tree of the dependencies of that object. So I in this instance clicked on that VM called artifact cache, and it shows me that the array that's connected to is dog food kibble. The other thing that you'll see is it will start to, I don't know if I have it on the video, so I'll try to show you that. So this is zoomed into the ESX host itself. It will show you the percentage of the CPU usage on the ESX host. And then let's say
for that VM, effectively?
Here it's the ESX host. So it will though. So if you see over here on the left, it will actually, if I click on an ESX host, it will show me the latency, IOPS, bandwidth, CPU, and memory usage of that ESX host. If I were to uncheck that checkbox, unfortunately it's a video, so I can't do that. But if I uncheck that checkbox and then check the virtual machine, it will populate that same data for the virtual machine.
I got you. That's nice.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, actually. It's a cool little, we've had it for a while, but I was surprised that when I was in the field, customers would use it for a lot of different things. Like some of them would use it for what I'm showing right here, where they, let's just say that this was some sort of latency spike that they didn't feel comfortable with. You can highlight the time that latency spike happened, and what you'll see is it will then dial in the whole entire view to that specific time range. So now you're seeing that environment snapshot of the time that you had or experienced that latency, and then you can kind of try to paint the picture of where that latency might lie. So it's pretty useful. The other thing that customers tend to use it for, which was not something I expected them to use it for, is you can go in and see like VMs that have just been turned off for a while. And I was at a customer and they went, wow, I'm really shocked at how many VMs just haven't been turned on for a really long time. He's like, I don't think I need to buy another ESX host right now because I can actually, so this is what I'm showing you right now. You'll see these double lines or I'm sorry, I'll go back there. These triple lines would show you that those machines have not been accessed for some period of time. So that customer ended up doing some research and freed up a bunch of machines from an engineering team that was developing an app that they just abandoned and decided not to go with. So it can be really useful for just cleaning up a virtual environment as well.
Yeah, very nice.
Did everyone see the details around how you can actually use the planning and recommendations engine to purchase equipment? Was that clear that you could do that from the tool?
Yeah, we highlighted that part, but I didn't go into it. So if you can go and show the actual workflow, that would be great.
Yeah, so I know that Stan showed simulating a new workload. So that's the 13 predetermined workloads that we use, Workload DNA, which is basically our Pure1 meta software to figure out what would be, small, medium, large, if you will, for those deployments. But if you were simulating a workload that's already on the system, you've seen this. Stan, I think, used the same example. We were on the cheese wheel array here, but let's just say that this engineering app was going to scale to some degree. We'll call it 4x. And you hit apply there, you're going to notice that like what Stan showed you, it's going to actively process and figure out what was my baseline and where am I at now with this new change. And unfortunately, if I were to 4x scale this, I'm now at 94% projected load from 36. So that's not really an area we want to be in, because now you're getting very close to the top end of your performance capability. And then if you look at capacity, you went from 69% to 246%. So there's no way that I can actually achieve this on the system. So if I were to save this simulation, and I know Stan showed this, is these all build on each other. So if you look over here on the left, there's this box, on the right, there's a box that you can click to sort of stack all of your simulations. So at this point, I know that this is probably not going to work out for me, but I can jump over to the hardware simulator, and the recommendation engine kicks in automatically. You don't have to tell it to turn on or anything. And it's basically saying, based on this projected load, I would recommend you would move to an X90R3 to be within a reasonable amount of headroom. So if I click that, it's gonna. If you look, I'll click back really quick. If you look at this screen right here that I have my mouse over, you're gonna see that change immediately after I click on X90R3, and you're gonna see the utilization drop down quite a bit. So now I'm at 59%. But immediately after that, because my capacity is at 246%, it's saying, look, I need capacity, and that's why this sort of lights up to say show recommended. The reason why we did it this way is because someone may be using the tool that knows nothing about how we size storage. They may say, I don't know what a data pack is at all. Because if you manually do this, you're effectively adding a data pack. But maybe the person using it doesn't even know what a data pack is. So if they click show recommended, it automatically adds the capacity that's required to get the application into good standing, which is the 256 terabyte data pack. But at that point, and because I'm in the demo environment, it's not going to light up. But this would light up request a quote on the customer end. So a customer or an application owner, whoever has access to it, can run these scenarios and actually go as far as requesting a quote, all from this interface. So that was something that we added that was new, because people were modeling things and then they were exporting the data to give to like their account SE. And so we said, why not just skip that step altogether? Why can't they click the request quote button, and then the account SE and the AE can have that conversation, and potentially the partner as well, about what that configuration means? Because what we've noticed is they're using this to get to a point, and maybe it gets refined with a physical meeting or a Zoom call or something like that. So this has been really helpful, I think, for a lot of customers or application owners that have access to the tool. So I think that was the one part we didn't cover in the initial section. And then you can always start over. You can take the simulations and delete them, and then you can just you can stack multiple simulations on top of each other. So if you were going to scale this workload as well as add a new application, you can do that and all sort of stack all those things on top of each other, and then sort of see if the environment's adequate. So it can get pretty. You can start layering these things and make some pretty sophisticated scenarios, and then decide, if you want to try to figure out where the things go, you can certainly do that. But the recommendation engine that Stan showed earlier is a great way to say, I've got a fleet of 10 arrays, where should this workload go? And I know there was a question earlier about, will the array move it for you? That would be awesome. I think that's something that we really aspire to, but for now it doesn't do that. But that would be really cool if it did. So I saw that was one of the things that someone mentioned. I think that's pretty neat, and definitely something that we have our eye on if we can possibly make that a possibility in the future.
Just on the automation stuff, so even a stepping stone between where we are now, where it just says, I recommend that you make these changes. Even if you don't go all the way to do the thing, like I just want to make it so button. So I go, yep, I agree, do it. That would be awesome. Yeah, that would be tremendous. But as a stepping stone to that, and as a way of building trust with people who might be a bit concerned about, maybe, I don't know, I want to see what it's doing, would be to just have it export something that will allow, like I can just, here's the script you would need to run, or set of commands, or whatever it might be for the environment, that I can then take to my operations team and say, here's the change plan. This is what Pure1 recommends. So it's not something that's just been made up by someone else that might be a bit wrong. That would actually be a good way to build trust with inside that customer that, yep, this is what Pure1 does. And then as soon as you've got the automated make it so button, I'm already used to what it does. So I'm not worried that it's going to do the wrong thing or do something weird that I don't understand. And then once I'm used to pressing the button, then you can just take the button away and do it automatically.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up great points. It's one of those things where I've been here I think Stan and I have been here for around the same time. And that idea of building trust is so important because when we first introduced the platform, we had so many things we wanted to automate day one. And there were things that we did automate. And it was like this shock factor for our customers because they're going, wait, hold on. I do all this stuff on my other systems. You're telling me I don't have to do any of these things. And so we kind of baby stepped our way into it. And one of those things, for instance, for a long time, we've had customers that have beta tested the ability to just drop the code right on and click upgrade, just like you would like an iPhone or an Android device. But believe it or not, that there were so many people uncomfortable with that idea that the array could just upgrade itself at any time. And I know you all being storage geeks like we are, you know how scary that could be. But so we're baby stepping into that. But I think we've earned a lot of trust at this point. So that suggestion is one that I feel like we could do that at this stage or this juncture in our progression. So I like that.
Yeah, I think in a lot of cases it requires connectivity between arrays. So a lot of the recommendations that we'd be making are moving workloads, and so that would require at least a couple steps where you connect the arrays up to each other, potentially replicate or use active cluster to move the workload across. Which we could get the steps in, but the connection you can't really get that in automated. And so we do want to make it as easy as possible. And I guess one of the ways that Pure looks at problems, and like Ralph said, we've been here for a little bit of a while. Sometimes we do look on the horizon and maybe skip over the more intermediate steps. So yeah, that's a great way to kind of think about it.
There was, I think there was only one other real aspect to sort of Pure 1 that we more recently sort of changed and tried to make it so that customers could sort of, that keeping with that one-stop shop theme, can they do everything from one interface? And they can currently open up support cases from Pure 1. That's been something we've had for a while, so they can go in here and say what product it is. It'll show, what you want to talk about, that you can mouse over the severity of the issue. It explains what each severity means. Obviously if it's Sev 1, we would prefer a customer would just call because they will be instantly connected with someone, but you can do that from here if you don't want to pick up the phone. But the other thing you can do as well is you can see your closed cases. And this was something we added just recently because, sometimes customers, we'll run some scenarios and we'll fix an issue for someone. And maybe that issue bubbles back up or something, or there's some other reason why they want to readdress the issue. They can simply just come in here and put some notes and then click reopen the case. So we really wanted to make support as integrated and as tightly integrated as possible with Pure 1 to the point where a customer could, in theory, do everything. And I don't know if I was having my technical issues earlier on the call, but when you covered safe mode, a customer doesn't need to technically talk to anyone to even enable that feature. They can just click on the system and we tie the scheduling system directly into support, so they can schedule a time that's convenient for them and open up a case with support to do that. And if they want to learn more, they can pull up safe mode best practices before they have that phone call or phone conversation. So we're really trying to make it as easy and self-service as possible. And so that's been a big theme and overarching theme on Pure 1 as we continue to develop it.